Hey guys! Welcome to our review of High Voltage by Karen Marie Moning. And we have done a review for every single one of these books in this series. So, lo and behold, another year has passed and we have to do...
Like, every January when this book comes over, it's like there's an alarm that goes off in one of our heads. Like, we were having this conversation, like, a few weeks ago where I'm like, Chelsey, I feel depressed. I feel like something's supposed to have happened. And you're like, well, the Karen Marie Moning book probably came out. Is that what you're upset about?
And you're like, yes it is.
We got our hands on a copy of High Voltage. It follows Danny and then shit got wild.
Okay, so, I mean... there's a lot that happened beforehand, so we won't really recap. Basically, where we left things off is they managed to save Dublin. They rediscovered the Song of the Making, and in the process of rediscovering the Song of the Making, Mac ends up becoming the new fairy queen, and Danny is no longer ruled by being Jada, and Christian McAllister is off doing stuff.
Yeah, he's on Saley. Danny finds her friend, Shazam, who turns out to be the last remaining Hellcat. And everything's gonna be okay.
Until the next book, anyway.
Till the next book. I mean, the last book really kind of closed off the series really well, and I was like, that's good. I'm done. It's over. We're done. We're out. It's over. We got all the questions we wanted. I mean, we never found out what the 9 was, but at this point in my life, I can move on. Oh, well, actually, there are more books coming out, and that was just the closing of the She Said Do arc, and I'm just like, oh no.
In this book, it starts off, and Dancer has died in the last book because he had heart failure. And that's as convenient for them as it is for Karen Marie Moning that he just happened to die, because we all know that Danny is supposed to be with Royodan, but it just hasn't happened yet. She had her run with Dancer, she managed to fuck him before he died, so she's happy about that, but he's now dead and she feels kind of guilty, it turns out, because she's kind of glad he's dead, because now she can go fuck Royodan!
And so, like, we get a 2-year time jump, but before the 2-year time jump, right, he goes to her and he's like, actually, we're all going, like, we gotta go. And, oh yeah, Mac and Barons are also going places, so have fun. Danny,
bye.
Bye. And so she is alone
in Dublin.
For 2 years, and then we get our 2-year time slip, and
I don't know, she's kicking around. She's been noticing some troubling things, like people have been disappearing and kind of just leaving kids orphaned, and so she's been picking up the orphans and taking them to Mac's mom, who's been running a pseudo-orphanage, and finding homes for kids. But there's some guys skulking around, kidnapping people, and dragging them into mirrors, and she's kind of going, what the fuck? I thought this shit was over with. Then, you know, because she's got the magical fairy killing sword, she's kicking around. Old god creature decides that, hey, you know what? I need that sword. So he, like, tricks her into wishing, I guess it is, and that kind of formed a contract with him. So I think she wishes for Royodan to come back.
Yeah.
And he does. She doesn't give him the sword, so, you know, he doesn't really he can fuck with her any way he wants, but he kind of doesn't in this book.
Yeah, it kind of leads to this confrontation where he's just like, give me the sword, we have a contract, and she's like, wait, what? What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And she's like, give me the sword. I'm an old god, fiddly-dee, like, you know, trickster. One of the Sealy princes who used to be Inspector Jane shows up. It's like, no, Danny, give the sword to me. And he starts, like, slowly, like, dropping his glamour.
Makes her want to fuck him.
Because why? Did you just, like, stop and think about, like, what are we doing right now? So she manages to get through this whole thing, keeping her sword, and because she has some weird magics, and she's like, what is this magic, and why has my arm turned even more black?
Because ever since she stabbed the hunter way back when she was a kid, I don't know, her arm has been pulsing black and then kind of disappearing, and it hasn't been a problem. But now, as she's been using this power to keep the old gods and the fairies from fucking with her, it starts to creep up her arm. And eventually it gets like her whole arm, if somebody accidentally touches her, and they just explode into a million pieces. And she's like, shit, now I'm deadly. Like, literally just...
No one can touch me!
Yeah.
No one but Shazam. She comes home to one of her favorite kind of like hidey holes where she finds one of the 9 in beast form, half dead, and she nurses him back to to health.
And then all of a sudden he disappears, and it turns out that Royden is back,
Woo!
and he's reopening his club.
Woo! Chester.
Yes.
Also, the bookstore's gone.
Yeah, it just, like, disappeared
one day.
So since Mac has been the fairy queen, she's like, listen, politics are weird. Please don't start shit with the fairies. I just need to get a handle on things and get things started, so don't touch the fairies. And Royden and Danny have been keeping to that. They're like, okay, we won't touch them. But eventually they're like, we haven't heard from Mac and Barons. The bookstore is gone. Shit is clearly wrong, so we're gonna stir some shit up. And so they march into the Sealy Club one day that has been running, and it turns out it's just like an underground, like, grindhouse? I don't know. Like, just people go in and they don't come out. And it looks like there's this big party going on, but it's really just a glamour. And there's more fairy princes that have been born, which is problems. You know, shit is clearly going down in the fairy world.
Because nobody knows where Mac is. So they're like, she's not even a real fae. She was a human, so she doesn't know what it's like, so she can't lead us.
Whining.
So are we going to talk about how this book uses rape as a plot development again?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so Danny's been going around and she's been collecting these children and bringing them to Mac's mother, as we said, so they can, like, be not on the streets, because even though the city is pretty much under control, there is kind of like that darker aspect of it at night, because, I mean, the fairies do still exist, and even though our characters have been told to play nice, there's still probably certain people who are breaking the rules, and even just humans taking advantage of, like, the situation. And so Danny saw these guys tormenting these children at the beginning of the novel, and she comes across them again. So she's like, I'm gonna fuck those guys up. And she tries to sneak up on them, but they see her even though she's she's invisible, and they, like, use some kind of magic poison dart that makes her paralyzed, and then they're, like, dragging her to bring her to their boss, but before they're gonna have a little
rape session.
I'm just like, why are we here? And so it's like a big moment for Danny to be like, yes, I have to overcome this magic, and then I'm gonna, like, fight them. And I'm like, this it just felt very, like, it could have been anything else.
It was just like, why is this in here? It's not necessary. Yeah. It doesn't develop anything. They could have been like, we're gonna cut off our hands because we like to wear hand hats. And it would have been just as shocking, right? Like, no. And then, of course, you know, she's got her whole relationship with Royden, and you look at it, and you're like, this is something that has been going on. Like, this is a plot thing that happens in books. Like, most notably, it was in Twilight, where they're like, this baby will one day be my mate. And you're like, stop it! Like, it's so creepy.
Yeah.
It's just, like, there's very select ways you can get around it. And the way that it becomes most creepy is if you're like, this baby will one day be my mate. And then you sit there and you watch it grow up.
Yeah.
And you're like, can we be boyfriend and girlfriend now? What about now? What about, is it creepy yet?
I think if this hadn't really been explored a lot more in, like, the Iced book, I wouldn't be as uncomfortable. Because in Iced, at one point, Mac literally tells Danny, and I could probably find the page number, that she needs to find a man who will take care of her and keep her safe like Barons takes care of Mac. She is, like, 12 years old.
Yeah. It's the fact that he's been there and he was like, I know she's gonna grow up and we're gonna fuck. Like, it's, like, half of it is the fact that he is so, like, every character is so sex driven.
Yeah.
Like, if they were just, like, normal people and they're like, oh, sweet 12-year-old, like, I'm not, like, completely driven by sex, it would have been, like, less creepy.
And I mean, okay, just to add to that. So, Ryden leaves, but he leaves Lore behind, our boy Lore, to, like, watch over her and look after her, and she's just like, oh my god, I can't believe Lore was spying on me because I like to dance naked. And Ryden's like, Lore didn't tell me that. Lore probably didn't stay for that because, like, if he did, he would have fucked you. And I'm like, wait, what?
But I wouldn't have done anything with him. And Royden's like, consent wouldn't have mattered. You're not as powerful as he is, as we are. You're telling me Lore, my Lore, who is always good to me, would have, I broke off, I'd have used his own club against him. Lore and me, we don't feel that way about each other. He's like, Laura's a beast first. We all are. Never forget that. Never underestimate it. We have our limits. We do what we must to manage those limits and minimize the fallout. It does things we don't want it to do with deadly consequences. Ergo, the moment you... Every time I hear ergo, I just think...
You think of the Matrix? Because I think of the Matrix. Ergo!
Ergo, the moment you began to disrobe, Laura would have left. He cherishes you, protects you, he calls you his little honey. So, like, basically the 9 are, like, men's, like, sexual urges that they have no way to tame unless they just, like, completely look away. They have no control over themselves.
The thing about these books is, like, every guy is, like, an alpha male. And the only non-alpha male was Dancer. Dancer was, like, built up to be kind of, like, a beta male.
Yeah.
And then this book, like, rewrites that as well. Like, they make Dancer's relationship creepy too, which really kind of upset me because it felt like the only natural relationship in this book series. Because in this book, Dancer writes a letter and gives it to Mac to give to Danny after he's died. And it's just basically like, we had all this fun together, but I was worried that I would never get to fuck you because you were too young, and like blah 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 blah, all the selfies we took together, best porn ever, and I'm just like, oh my god.
Why does everything have to come back to this? Like, stop it. And then Royden is such a drama queen at the same time. So, you know, Danny is trying to get over Dancer, and she's like, okay, well, you know, they say the easiest way to get over someone is, like, go out and have a one-night, like, stand. So she goes out. Royden at this point had, like, disappeared, and so she's like, he's gone. Anyways, I'm gonna go out and fuck this guy. Oh, this guy kind of looks like Royden. You know what? I'm gonna fuck him. And it doesn't go the way she wants it to, and so then he decides to, like, lock himself away for the 2 years and starves himself because no reason.
You walked above me once, feeling lost. I tried to send you a thought, but the pain was so intense by then, the hunger so consuming. I'm not certain it got through. It was either make Barons imprison me in a spelled cage I couldn't escape, where he'd once contained his son, or cut my brand off of you and risk you getting lost. I was never going to risk that. If you'd called me, Barons would have released me. If you'd used the IISS, it would have bypassed the spells holding me. He basically locks himself in a cage because the beast portion of him thinks that Danny is his and doesn't like the idea that Danny is fucking other guys. So to let her have that experience, he physically starves himself.
And, like, locks himself in a cage.
And Danny's like, oh god, the whole time I'd been so angry at Ryan and had left me alone. He'd been alone too, suffering. He'd been starved because he hadn't eaten for 2 years, shut away in the ground.
Are you serious? Like, such a drama queen too, because you know what? If he had wanted to eat, he would have had one of his buddies, like, airmail a body over to him. Like, just, like, take it down a couple levels, buddy. Actually, I kind of like the plot where you're like, somebody's been waiting like 1,000 years to find somebody who, like, is just, like, absolutely their one person. I kind of love that plot. But it gets creepy when they meet them when they're a baby.
Yeah.
Let's say, I figured out the levels of creepy to this. Okay, so you're walking along, you've lived thousands of years, you haven't met your special person, you see a baby in a baby carriage and you're like, that's it! That's the one! Kind of creepy. But if you walk away and you're like, I'm gonna come back in, like, 25 years... less creepy. Well,
because if you look at, I always find a way to tie everything back to Bram Stoker's Dracula. If you look at Bram Stoker's Dracula and the love, like, romance plot that they added to that, I mean, there's still kind of the creepy thing of the count, like, coveting Mina, but she's an adult when they meet.
Yeah. Not like, this 5-year-old's gonna grow up to be a great woman.
You know what the worst part of this entire thing is? Like, the main storyline is really interesting. Yeah. And it's just not really dealt with.
The main story plot is actually the B plot.
Because, like, the whole idea is that with the Song of the Making having been sung and magic has been brought back into the world, there are some repercussions, which I liked, because double-edged sword.
Happened.
And so one of the things that happened was that it woke up the old gods, and we kind of learn a little bit about how the fairies kind of screwed over the old gods and turned humanity against them, and the old gods were tortured, and the old gods were like, now they want to torture humanity for betraying them.
Because, you know, humanity and the old gods, they were on good terms, they were merciful, you know, they, like, took care of each other, but then the fairies came and they kidnapped the old gods, and then, like, started walking around as the old gods and just fuck shit up, so the humans were like, oh my god, what the fuck, these old gods are actually dicks.
We have to, like, hang out with the fairies because they're good. She kind of touches on the whole idea of, like, how a history and mythology can be changed by colonizers, and how the Irish don't really even know their own kind of folklore because it's been stomped through by other religions.
Like Christianity and just things have been mashed into other things.
And so they're having a hard time researching and figuring out about these old gods because everything has been affected by other stuff. So, like, they're researching the one god, and they're getting, like, 6 different versions of his origin story. They're like, this is great, how is this going to help?
This is, like, a really interesting plot, and so she encounters one of the old gods, he's pissed off, you know, he's gonna come back, and then there's another old god who's been, like, kidnapping all these souls, and, you know, he's
holding them inside himself and using their bodies like zombies.
Yeah, and he's created this army, and then it turns out that, you know, all the old gods were imprisoned, like, under their abbey, so, you know, shit is going down, and then this old god who's been, like, built up to be this big bad just kind of gets, like,
taken out
in, like, one scene.
I love the mythology of this series, and this is the first time that I feel like my mythology aspect has been let down because we're focusing on, like,
Dany's personal issues versus...
And I mean, personal issues are fine when the personal issue boils down to, am I going to fuck Ryodan or not?
Yeah. And I mean, of course she's dealing with this, like, turning black thing, and that's kind of what becomes, like, the climax. Instead, when I say turning back, I mean she's, like, gaining this power, and she's got this, like, lightning power.
They realize that she's turning into a hunter, that
yeah.
when she killed the hunter, it's infected her in a way. And every time she uses the power, it's kind of speeding up that transformation.
So she finally, like, uses this power to kill this old god in a battle that is not in any way, like, like, you're not, like, nervous for anybody. You're like, oh, she's just gonna zap it.
You kind of wander into this battle, and, like, everyone before has been like, don't use your power, Dany, and Dany's like, I won't use my power. Don't use your power, Dany, I won't use my power. And you're like, she's totally gonna use the power, and you realize, oh, wait, this is the climax.
Yeah, this is where things are supposed to get intense. She uses her power and she finally becomes a hunter. And she's like, she goes up into the cosmos and she meets the hunter that she stabbed originally. And that hunter is like, hey, you're my baby now. I, like, turned you into an egg and now you're my baby. But you know what? I'm also your good pal Shazam! Hi!
And so we're gonna explore the cosmos together, yay!
You're gonna live forever, yay! And conveniently, you get to spend half your time as a human, so you can go back and fuck right in. That's so convenient. You mean I get to be all-powerful and have my cake and eat it too? Okay! Like, so it was a little ridiculous.
This book also felt like it was very encompassed. When she said, oh, the next book is gonna follow Dany, I thought it was gonna kick off, like, another series to, like, of Dany books, but this kind of felt very, like...
It's a placeholder.
Yeah, until Mac comes back as like...
The Fairy Queen.
The Fairy Queen, and we get the battle with the old gods.
Yeah. Long story short, she does get to fuck Ryodan.
Yes.
In case you're, like, on the edge of your seat, she does get to fuck Ryodan.
Okay, and then there's also the other side plot about Kat.
Yeah.
Kat has a young daughter, and the love of her life was turned into, he's a plague unseelie prince, and so he's off, like, brooding with Christian because Christian has a castle and they live in it together and they're just really upset. Sean finds out about this kid. He's, like, really like an asshole. He's like, I want a paternity test, because he thought that she was cheating on him with one of the 9, and she's like, I was raped by Cruz.
She's like, so, I don't know whose kid this is.
This is either, like, Cruz's child or Sean's child, and, like, can't you just love this kid? And he's like, no, I'm so dramatic, and storms off.
She didn't tell him about the Cruz thing.
She doesn't. She's just like, don't you trust me? This is your child.
And he's like, I have issues, goodbye. And so he goes off and he's been brooding in his castle. And meanwhile, Christian has been, like, containing his powers and, you know, he's not causing problems.
And so Christian comes to Kat and is just like, hey, so I need you to come and talk to Sean because Sean is, like, literally out of control and I need you to fix this. And she's like, I'll go to him because I love him.
Yeah. And you're like, okay. And so she goes to him and she's like, listen, I realize that I haven't told you the whole truth, and it's probably causing you some anguish, and I really want to help you out with this thing. So here's the truth. I was raped by Cruz, and it could be his kid. We can still do the paternity test, though, if you really want.
The way I see this scene, it reminded me of season 2 in A Series of Unfortunate Events, when Count Olaf was like draping himself around the room, like draping off the furniture and things, because Sean is just like, there's nothing for you here, Kat. Like, you know, like, just, I don't love you anymore. Like,
you're just like, okay, fine, whatever. And then it turns out she's, I don't know, giving her daughter a bath or something. And she's got these, like, 2, like, wing bones.
Like, numb. They're not even, like, nubs.
Yeah.
They're just, like, little, like, nubs. And she's just like, oh my god, she's, like, half fey. And then the next day they're gone. And she's like, maybe they were just mosquito bites. And I'm like, that was too obvious.
Yeah.
That's gonna come into play in the
Nobody goes, mosquito bites.
perfectly in the...
And on the 2 shoulder blades, definitely, like, wings. Like, nobody does that.
Oh man, I hope this kid's the real big bad.
The demon child, like, that'd be so funny. Yeah, the one scene I really liked, though, from this was when they finally talk to Barons. They're just doing their thing, and somehow, like, Barons, like, beams them up into the bookstore. And, like, the bookstore apparently hasn't really moved. It's just hovering above where it was before and invisible. And so Barons is in this bookstore and he's like, okay, you know, let me update you on what's been going on because shit's been going down. Mac and I went to Ferry. It did not go well. They were welcoming for a couple days, but then they tried to kill us. And so we barely escaped with our lives. And I hold Mac up in the White Mansion in a room where time doesn't really pass at all. Mac is in there, it's barricaded, nobody can get in, and she's learning how to use her fairy magic. And every once in a while, she changes shit in the bookstore just so I know she's alive. And her current thing that she's done is she's like beamed a lemur into the bookstore, which somehow Barons, with all his like 9 capabilities, cannot seem to catch. Funniest thing to me. Because he should be able to catch this thing with his eyes closed and like 2 fingers. Like he should just be able to pluck the thing out of the air. So in my head, she's like altered this lemur.
He's probably lonely without me. Let me give him a problem to deal with. Like,
yeah. And that was my favorite part of the entire book, was just imagining him chasing this lemur around the store.
Oh my god. One of my pet peeves about this series is Karen Marie's Moning's needing to reference current media
Oh my god,
that would not exist in this world because the wall has fallen. So her obsession in this book was Sherlock. Annie and Ryan analyzed the woman sequence in Sherlock for like 6 pages. Not only does it kind of like break the world building, it also dates the book.
Yeah, 100%.
So in like 15 years, someone will pick this up and be like,
what the fuck? What are they talking about?
Yeah. It's kind of a mess.
It is. It's not like a slogfest though. Like
No.
you're not reading it and you're just like, please let this end. Stuff's happening, you're interested, but at the same time you were rolling your eyes
And
so hard.
It's not the worst in the series.
The thing about it too is it does, like, you read it and you're like, oh, this sentence right here is kind of very feminist. And then the next second you're like, oh, and they're back to talking about fucking again. And
it's not even like, okay, it's not that fucking isn't feminist.
But it's just like the way they talk about it.
Antiquated gender roles.
Yeah.
Kinda makes it.
That's the whole thing you think every time you come across some of those lines. You're just like, ugh, make this stop. Anyways, so that was our review of High Voltage by Karen Marie Moning. Tell us what you thought in the comments. Have you picked this book up? What do you think of the series? And we will see you next time when we read the next book, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.